Jonathan Kuminga has not seen much playing time for the Warriors these last few weeks, but that does not stop some people around Chicago Bulls Nation still trying to make the connection as Jonathan Kuminga potentially being a good fit for the Chicago Bulls. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about it. Is Jonathan Kuminga a good fit? And is he what the Chicago Bulls are looking for? Yeah, I know we're going to talk about it all, break it down, but you got to hear the music first.
Cognac, gang.
Shy Boys Podcast with the Cognac Boys. I'm Cognac Boy Bobby, and I'm holding it down on today's daily episode. So if you tuned in with me today, make sure you go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. But let's talk about Jonathan Kuminga, man. Is he what the Chicago Bulls are actually looking for? If you look at Jonathan Kuminga, only 22 years of age, a 4-year vet in this league, and throughout his career, Jonathan Kuminga has averaged 12.5 points per game, 2 assists, 4 rebounds, 33% shooting from the three, and 50% shooting from the field. And if you look at him this past season with the Golden State Warriors, he upped those point totals to 15 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, and still just hanging around 2 assists. But it's kind of a drop off if you're looking at what Jonathan Kuminga was able to do the year prior to this season. He had 16 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 2 assists. And he was a little bit more better and a little bit more involved in what the Warriors were actually trying to do. I don't know necessarily what has happened between Jonathan Kuminga and the Golden State Warriors and why the Golden State Warriors just feeling like, yeah, we pretty much done with him is what it's actually looking like. Is this something that is just temporarily, or is it something that could potentially change moving forward for Jonathan Kuminga's career and the Golden State Warriors if they do decide to retain him, or if they are more on the side of you're like James Wiseman to us, it's time to move on, get you out of the building, probably get something back for you, and let's just all move on. But does he fit what the Chicago Bulls are looking for? I would say absolutely. We look at what the Chicago Bulls have came out and said, especially as the season ended. Arturas Karnisovas pretty much said that, hey, we're looking for a young player and with experience. Jonathan Kuminga fits that. We're looking at young athletic players. Jonathan Kuminga fit that. But he's not so great as a three-point shooter as what a lot of people may go out there and say. I don't necessarily know if a lot of people believe that, but he is a guy that can very well improve in that area when it comes to shooting the long ball. But he is a player that's going to come in and be able to give the Chicago Bulls a lot of different things, and it does fit the mold of what the front office is pretty much trying to put out there, and that is a team that's kind of like in the middle, but they're trying to get players in here that are young with experience that could potentially continue to grow within the franchise. And Jonathan Kuminga fits that criteria, what Arturas pretty much painted out for us at the end of the season. Young player with experience. And he's going to be coming from a championship organization that has been coached by one of the best coaches in the league, that has played with players like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, now Jimmy Butler, and a bunch of other players that have brought, some type of good stuff for the Golden State Warriors. How much should we consider Golden State pretty much saying that we're done with him, though, is one of the questions that I have on my mind when we talk about Jonathan Kuminga, because they pretty much given up on him. They pretty much given up on him and saying that, hey, man, we don't care what you could potentially bring to the squad. We just pretty much done with you. Just in this series that the Warriors just finished up last night versus the Houston Rockets, Jonathan Kuminga only played in 3 of the 7 games that the Warriors played. And then in the last game that he did receive time, he only played 7 minutes. So it's something that we should consider, in my opinion, especially because if you're not a part of, a championship team and not having a vital role in that, with the expectations that was placed on you early on and how they could have utilized his size and his athleticism to help the team, it does raise a little bit of a red flag. But I will add in that Jonathan Kuminga at just 22 years old, he still has room to grow. But the problem is the Chicago Bulls got rid of the player development coach in Peter Patton. So how do we move forward with that? Or what is the expectations to help this young player to continue to develop? Could a change of scenery possibly do something like that for him? Maybe, because you're dealing with the Golden State Warriors who are literally fighting for their last championship, and they are pretty much getting ready to phase things out. But in my mind, if you are the Golden State Warriors, you look at a Jonathan Kuminga kind of like in the same light that you would look at players on the Golden State Warriors like a Moses Moody, like a Brandon Podziemski. Look at players like that in that regard, and they didn't even go to him when they could have utilized some of his services. Maybe they feeling like, hey, he's just not the player that we need him to be for this particular series. And as they move on to go face Minnesota, it could be potentially different. And maybe they do utilize his athleticism and his height and some of his skill set to help. Or maybe they could just revert to, nah, we just not going to utilize you. You've seen guys like Post come and receive more playing time than a Jonathan Kuminga, and I don't necessarily know if Post is better than Jonathan Kuminga right now, but it seems like he hasn't retained that trust that he once had with the Golden State Warriors organization, and I think that we should really be looking at those type of things to see how we can gauge this player. But the same thing could be said about Josh Giddey. When Josh Giddey was over there with the Oklahoma City Thunder, hey, he fell out of the good graces with them, came over to the Chicago Bulls, had to get his, find his stride. And then he eventually took off. And now he's one of those players to like, yes, you have to pay this player moving forward. I think that's going to be one of the challenges, though, with Jonathan Kuminga and all this stuff, though, is because he's going to be going into restricted free agency. And how much money would the Chicago Bulls be willing to give up or to say, let's make this young player an offer to get him on the Chicago Bulls? But another question that I have on my mind is, what would a trade package look like for Jonathan Kuminga? Do the Warriors and the Chicago Bulls get into some talks to where they initiate some type of signing trade? Will Patrick Williams be a bargaining chip in that? I don't necessarily know if the Warriors are looking at a Patrick Williams like that. Me personally, I'm not too sold on Patrick Williams at this current moment, simply because I've had enough of him and I've seen what he's potentially made and I've seen what he is made of. It's not really a good taste in my mouth when you talk about Patrick Williams and, the potential of him getting better. Can he very well get better? Absolutely. But if I'm, as a fan, not feeling Patrick Williams like that, how does a head coach like Steve Kerr feel about Patrick Williams, who has the size, who has the athleticism, who is a better three-point shooter than Jonathan Kuminga, but you just can't hit the right buttons to get P. Will to be aggressive enough? How does that work out in some type of trade talk when you want to get in these type of negotiations or these talks about potentially signing and moving other players? Does Nikola Vucevic reemerge as somebody that can go in and be a bargaining chip when it comes to the trade packages that the Chicago Bulls and the Warriors can put together? I look at that type of situation as being one that's not 100% guaranteed in my mind, because I'm looking at the Warriors team. They got old guys all around on the team already. Do they want to say, let's go add another old guy to this team? Yeah, Nikola Vucevic, he's very, very durable. We can't take that away from him. Nikola Vucevic has that offensive game that could very well help the Golden State Warriors. But is it conducive to what they want to do when it comes to winning? Simply because, you know what I'm saying, Nikola Vucevic is not he's able to run the floor. But as much as the Golden State Warriors get up and down the floor, I don't necessarily know if that's what they seem as a good fit for their organization and their team, as they're constantly trying to hit their heads on the door to get themselves another championship before you have to send Steph Curry off to retirement, send Jimmy Butler now off to retirement, Draymond Green, the same thing. And I'm pretty sure those two guys are going to be retiring around the same time, simply because Draymond Green, I don't personally believe he's going to want to play any type of basketball without Steph. So it's going to be interesting to see what would a trade package look like for Jonathan Kuminga, or would the Chicago Bulls go out there and just sign a offer for him in restricted free agency. I don't necessarily know if that's going to be on the table, but it's going to be interesting to see how these different things match up because, like I said, he does fit what the Chicago Bulls are looking for. It's still going to be some questions on how he is a fit for the Chicago Bulls, but it's definitely going to be something that we're going to keep our eyes on. Another question that I'm keeping and I'm asking myself is, who do we give up? Not only do we want to move Nikola Vucevic, not only am I willing to give up on Patrick Williams, but what about some of the other guys that might be on the team? We heard that Ayo Dosunmu has come up in some of these talks, and I'm pretty sure that might be a player that the Golden State Warriors might be looking at in Ayo Dosunmu as he comes back from that shoulder injury. What about guys like Trey Jones? I know he's going to be a free agent this season, this offseason coming up here shortly. But if you're the Chicago Bulls, do you want to retain that type of player, or are you just cool with saying, "Nah, we good. We gonna stick around with Lonzo. We re-signed him. We gonna let him come hoop for us, and we gonna keep it pushing." What about the Kevin Huerter that you pick up? Do you utilize him in his last year on his deal to say, "Hey, go to State Warriors. We got another tall, lanky guy. Got a little bit of athleticism on him. Is still a solid three-point shooter. Look what he did for us." Do you include that in some type of sign and trade talks? It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this all works. Some problems that I'm looking at when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga, if the Chicago Bulls do see that he is a fit for their team, I got to look at how does he fit. Do you move Montes Buzelis to the 3 and you allow him to play the 4, or vice versa? And where do you find what will be the intentions behind having him have a role with the team? It's going to be very, very interesting because he's not a solid 3-point shooter, at least at the time being. And I already alluded to it earlier. We're looking at a guy like Peter Patton not being on this Bulls team anymore, who has helped players tremendously, has helped Kobe White, has been a intricate part of Josh Giddey's progression this past season, has helped Dalen Terry fix that form and now become a more confident 3-point shooter, though we need to see the percentage go up now. Peter Patton was a guy, like if you would have brought Jonathan Kuminga over here and had Peter Patton work on him, work with his skill set, help him get that 3-point shot better. And I understand that it's not the end all be all when it comes to how you can play basketball, but it's definitely one of the parts of what the Chicago Bulls are trying to do. They want to get up and down the court pretty damn fast. They want to either attack the basket or they want to attempt the 3. Now, he can very well attack the basket. That's Jonathan Kuminga with that type of athleticism, and he's going to get up and down the court with these young players. But where do you stop, or where do you look at Jonathan Kuminga as a 3-point shooter, and who can help him develop and get better in that regard? So it's going to be some interesting things for how the Chicago Bulls view him, how they're going to look at him, how do they want to see him improve his game. I think he's going to be all right defensively. I think he's going to be able to help the Chicago Bulls get younger, obviously, but it's still going to be some questions on the offensive side. And every player has their, downfalls when it comes to what they can and can't do on the offensive side. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But those are just some of those things that I have on my mind when it comes to if they do go out there and seek if Jonathan Kuminga could come over here, because a change of scenery could very well do wonders for him. It could very well do wonders for him. You know what I'm saying? Bringing him over here, giving him a solid opportunity. And I think more of those decisions and more of that discussion is going to continue to happen. But I also believe that it can either get amplified or it can die down a little bit once we find out next week where the Chicago Bulls will be picking in this upcoming draft. Because if you picking somewhere early, hey, you can go out there and get your big man of the future and Kaman Maluap. You could absolutely go and do that. And then you won't have to necessarily worry about how does Jonathan Kuminga affect how we can move this offseason. But if you have to, let's say, pick at 12, maybe that might be some type of thing that you still entertain, but then you look at some other available options to you. So I think it's going to be a lot of things that are going to help provide clarity to the Chicago Bulls and how they want to move just in about another week or two on what their intentions are and what their goals are moving forward. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Y'all make sure y'all lock in. And I definitely feel like he is absolutely what the Chicago Bulls are looking for. But my biggest question is, how does he fit when it comes to Jonathan Kuminga? But that is it for me today. I appreciate y'all for tuning in to another episode. Go ahead and hit that like button. Hit the comment box too, man. Let me know your thoughts on this whole thing. Do you believe Jonathan Kuminga is what the Chicago Bulls are looking for? And then let me know if you believe he will fit. Those are two different questions. Two different questions. So that let me know down below. Let's chop it up and let's see how we can make sense of this. But hey, before you go, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. The voice line is open. So if you want to call in and be a part of one of our episodes, you can call in, state your name, leave your take. The number to do so is 773-242-9219. We appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all always see red, and y'all already know I'm going to catch y'all on the next one, for sure.
Cognac. Gang.